How you doing?
It feels like a large portion of the internet thinks that Friends is a horrible show. Yet still, it's one of the most successful series of all time, even over 25 years since it first aired. Is the show truly boring, unfunny, and cringy like many people say? Or is there something special about Friends that made so many people fall in love with it? These questions were on my mind for a long time, so I set out to find answers. I was never really a fan of the show, but I decided to watch all 10 seasons and then condense my thoughts into this one review. Did I love it? Or did I hate it? The results may shock you. Friends was pretty much an instant hit, but by today's standards, these early seasons are kind of hard to get into because the plots are simple and the writing is quite downbeat. These early episodes have a wholesome warmth to them, which I'm sure appeals to a lot of people. However, if you go into the show expecting a hilarious thrill ride, that's not really what you're going to get, at least for the first season or two. In the pilot, we learned that Rachel had just ran away from her wedding, and we learned that Ross had recently gotten divorced because his ex-wife turned out to be a lesbian. Friends seems like it has a pretty basic plot. It's mainly just 6 people in their 20s living their lives, but when it came out, it was very novel. Before the 90s, most sitcoms were about families or workplaces. This was because back in the day, most people after they graduated from school almost instantly got a job, got married, and had a family in their early 20s. But with Gen X, the generation that the Friends characters are, it became more common for people to push away settling down to instead focus on their career and find the person who's truly the one for them. This resulted in a lot of new issues for people, which the show Friends covered well. Friends wasn't the only show to explore these storylines. Living Single and Seinfeld both came out before Friends and had similar premises. However, Friends being the biggest show of all time is no accident. It must have some X factor to it, which I hope to uncover later on. Season 1 has some standout episodes like the one with the blackout, but most of it feels pretty middle of the road to me. Season 2 is definitely a step up. It's still not Friends fully formed, but it feels a little more snappy with its writing.
No, shut up! The camera adds 10 pounds.
So how many cameras are actually on you?
This season is a lot more serialized. There's a lot more overarching storylines, but the main one is the will they won't they drama between Ross and Rachel. Season 1 had a little bit of this, but it was pretty one-sided with Ross just crushing on Rachel in every episode. But in season 2, they finally come together in the one with the prom video. In this episode, the friends watch an old home movie where Rachel thinks her boyfriend abandoned her before prom. Ross then gets all dressed up to make her happy, but as soon as he's ready, Rachel leaves without him. This moment proves that Ross has always been selfless and he's always cared about Rachel, which wins her over. Ross and Rachel then kiss and everyone's happy. I'm sure their relationship will last a really, really long time. I feel like season 2 was a little over-reliant on Ross and Rachel. Their drama also felt a little dragged out at points, but this episode makes up for it. It's probably the strongest of the series so far, and it goes to show that the writers can write good drama. With season 2, I realized that Friends isn't trying to tackle any world issues with its writing, and it isn't trying to be a deliberate and intricately written comedy masterpiece. Quite the opposite actually. Friends is genuine, unforced, and carefree with its writing, which is meant to simulate what it's like catching up with your friends. And that's great, but it's just not for me. Sorry. It is trash and stupid. I will never ever like it. Never ever. With these seasons, I realized that I love Friends, I've always been a Friends fan, and Friends is my favorite show. I'm exaggerating, but I do actually fully enjoy this series now after watching these seasons. And you may be wondering, what made me have this change of heart? Well, I'm glad you asked because that's what I'm going to be discussing. With season 3, the show got more experimental. It wasn't on the same level as like Community, but the humor got a little bit more absurd, which made it funnier for me, and there were a lot more one-off episodes where the writers tried something new and different, like an entire episode where the friends are playing American football, for example. I think the most interesting episode to talk about from season 3 is the one where no one's ready, where Ross stresses out as the rest of the friends aren't getting ready for a black tie event at his museum. The entire episode is set in Monica's apartment, and each of the characters have their own storylines, which weave in and out of each other as they leave and enter the living room. With this episode, you can really feel that it was choreographed like a stage play, and I think that's a very unique trait of laugh track sitcoms that other shows sort of neglect. In a show like The Office, a lot of the humor comes from the subtlety of the facial expressions or the subtlety of the dialogue, but in a show like Friends, the complete opposite is true. They can't be subtle and let a joke fly under the radar because they're playing up to an audience, so they have to be big. And the actors achieve this by doing a lot of physical acting, like exaggerated movements and stunts. Drew Gooden already said this in his Friends video, but you can watch an entire Friends episode on mute and still get what's going on, because the actors are so good at showing emotion with their bodies. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Friends is so popular internationally. I don't really know. Also in this season, Ross and Rachel break up, which I'm devastated about. Basically, Rachel says to Ross, let's take a break. Ross then sleeps with another woman. Rachel finds out. Ross is then sorry, but he defends himself by saying,
We were on a break!
This is a running joke in Friends that people make merch about and stuff, and over the course of the show, it transformed into Ross being like, we were on a break, and Rachel responds with, we weren't on a break, even though she literally said it herself in the original episode.
Oh, maybe we should just take a break. A break from us. We were on a break.
But the question shouldn't be, were they on a break? The question should be, what was Rachel's intent when she said that they should take a break? / how immoral was Ross for sleeping with another woman so soon? But you can't really put that on a t-shirt. Another notable part of this season is Joey adopting a chick and a duck, which was a fun little addition to Friends. Interestingly, they made almost 20 appearances, but at some point they just stopped appearing in the show. Why did this happen? Well, it's a mystery I will solve very soon. I think I'm gonna start rating each season out of 5 from now on. It's important to note though that my ratings like 3 years from now will probably be completely different. But retrospectively, after having seen the entire show, I've decided that season 1 is a 3 and season 2 is a 3.5, while season 3 is a comfortable 4. It has some storylines I don't love, and it isn't as consistently funny and iconic as some of the seasons coming up, but I'd still consider it to be a good season of Friends. Season 4 is probably the most hectic season. A lot of major stuff happens over just 24 episodes, like Chandler and Joey's apartment getting robbed, Chandler falling in love with Joey's girlfriend, Phoebe becoming a surrogate mother, the friends going on a trip to London, and Ross getting married. What? I will talk more about that later. Pretty much all of these storylines go hard and hit different.
Would you please just...
My favorite storyline from this season happens in the one with the embryos, where Rachel and Monica lose a Jeopardy-style game against Chandler and Joey, and as a forfeit, they have to swap apartments. The questions in the game were themed around the characters, which meant that as a viewer you could learn a lot of fun details about each of them, which I thought was quite cool. And it's not like the apartment swapping was a one-off thing for the episode. The show continues with the apartments being changed around up until episode 19 of season 4. And I think that's a very fun idea which led to a lot of interesting episodes. I find it cool that every Friends episode works as its own self-contained story, which gives you the satisfaction of a beginning, middle, and end in just 22 minutes. But also the show constantly has overarching narratives which keep the viewers watching long term. If you actually map out the story arcs in season 4 on a spreadsheet, you see how they're constantly overlapping, stopping and starting, and sometimes story arcs even interact. Like how the reason Chandler and Joey get furniture again is because Chandler kissed Joey's girlfriend in the other story arc, and he feels the need to do a nice gesture because of his guilt. Sitcoms at the time usually stuck to being quite episodic, meaning they had almost no overarching storylines, but Friends was one of the first shows to fully embrace that half episodic, half serialized way of storytelling. When you're watching Friends, you don't even notice this because it works so seamlessly, but if you actually think about it, the writers put a lot of effort into structuring these seasons. Later in season 4, Ross falls in love with an English girl called Emily, and they end up having a wedding in London as the season finale. Emily isn't too likable, and this marriage happened way too quickly, but I do think that's the point of the storyline, and a lot of fun episodes came from it, so I'll excuse how random and rushed it feels. In the finale, Ross ends up accidentally saying Rachel's name at the wedding, which, you know, is an annoying mistake to make. And since Emily was already really jealous of Rachel, this moment led to the downfall of Ross's second marriage in the next season.
It be like that sometimes.
I know some people don't love season 4 because Emily ruins it for them, or even the Kathy storyline ruins it for them, but I don't care. This season is relatively flawless in my eyes, so I'd give it a 4.5 out of 5, which is very high, but somehow season 5 is better. This is the funniest season of Friends. This is the best season of Friends. And it is honestly one of the best seasons of a sitcom ever. The humor in Friends got progressively more over the top each season, and I think that hurt the show later on. But in season 5, the perfect eclipse happens between being funny, but also the series telling real, relatable stories about well-rounded characters. Season 4's finale revealed that Chandler and Monica hooked up in London, and the main hook of the first 14 episodes of season 5 is Chandler and Monica hiding their relationship. In a sitcom, there are usually two main types of romances. With romance type 1, you're meant to take it seriously, it's usually the drama of the show, and they're meant to seem like a real couple. While with romance type 2, jokes come from it, it's a little silly at points, etc. Friends manages to accomplish both with Chandler and Monica. The viewer takes Chandler and Monica as a couple seriously because they have chemistry and also they feel authentic. With Ross and Rachel, you sort of feel that them coming together is pretty much a destiny thing, but Chandler and Monica's hookup felt spontaneous. Yet the twist still didn't feel like a complete left turn because it was hinted at well in seasons 3 and 4.
There's a nuclear holocaust. I'm the last man on Earth. Would you go out with me?
But alongside it being a great match, them hiding their relationship also leads to some of the funniest moments of the show. Comedy in a sitcom works best when the characters are in a state of discomfort, and keeping a secret like that is a perfect catalyst for conflict and comedy. Like when the group catches Chandler and Monica kissing, so Chandler has to kiss everyone else to make it seem like it's just a way of saying goodbye. Or when Chandler and Monica are having a bath together and Joey walks in, so Monica has to dunk her head under the water. There's tons of fun moments like this throughout season 5, since hiding a secret that big can cause a lot of elaborate deception, big revelations, and huge misunderstandings.
I'm just gonna ask you this one time, all right? And whatever you say, I'll believe you. Were you, or were you not, on a gay cruise?
That storyline ends in the one where everybody finds out, which in my opinion is the best episode of the entire show. Phoebe and Rachel figure out that Chandler and Monica are dating, but instead of confronting them, they try to mess with them by having Phoebe flirt with Chandler. It goes back and forth until Phoebe and Chandler kiss, causing Chandler to admit that he's in love with Monica. So cute, so fun. This episode is a lot more layered than your average Friends episode because there's a lot of I know that they know that you know type stuff, and it's entertaining seeing how elaborate and crazy the characters get with trying to mess with each other. Ross is hated by some for being mopey, annoying, and deluded at points, and with this season the writers just dial all of those traits up to 11. And you may think, what are they doing? Ross is going to be unwatchable for this whole season. Well, it actually works because of two main reasons. One, you genuinely feel bad for Ross. His marriage falls apart, he loses his apartment, and he loses his job in the space of like 10 episodes. At that point, you just have to sympathize with him, because one human, even Ross, doesn't deserve that much suffering. Second of all, in previous storylines, Ross's whininess was played as drama. However, in season 5, they decided to play Ross's descent into madness as comedy, which works a lot better.
I think I'm gonna go wander out in the rain for a while.
But it's not raining.
I can't catch a break.
I do genuinely believe that David Schwimmer is one of the best sitcom actors of all time, because he's given the most tragic and annoying character, yet he still manages to make him the funniest one, maybe excluding Chandler. I do think that David Schwimmer's performance in Friends is almost on the same level as Steve Carell's performance in The Office, but the world isn't ready for that debate yet. With previous seasons, the writers very clearly said these are the funny storylines and these are the serious storylines. But in season 5, the drama and the comedy is sort of blended together and it gives the story so many more layers. So, in conclusion, season 5 is a 5 out of 5. Don't play with me. The two main multi-episode arcs of this season are the best arcs of the entire show. This is the only Friends season that I'd consider to be really funny, and it's also the season with the biggest quantity of classic episodes. The season ends with the Friends going to Las Vegas, where Ross and Rachel impulsively get married while being drunk. This is a fun season finale, but it sort of feels like the end of an era, because once the characters come back to New York, the show feels different. I'd still consider seasons 6 and 7 to be a part of the show's peak, but they feel quite different to the previous seasons. Issues within Friends start becoming more noticeable here, which I will talk about, but also in this section of the video I will figure out why the chick and the duck disappear, so stay tuned for that. Season 6 starts with Rachel wanting to get her marriage with Ross annulled, and Ross says he got it done even though he didn't. You can kind of understand Ross's motivation, because I'm sure having 3 failed marriages in 6 years is quite embarrassing, but him just completely lying to Rachel for a few episodes feels irrational emotional and almost out of character. As you know, I really liked Ross in season 5, but I feel like what happened to him there hurt his character in the long term, because this sort of neurotic and immoral behavior from him just becomes commonplace. And I think the writers could have dialed it back or taken him in a different direction. But if you don't nitpick it like I am doing right now, Ross remains pretty funny in these seasons. What I notice is that Friends embraces its wackiness a lot more here. For example, there's an episode where Ross overly whitens his teeth, so he desperately tries to hide his mouth while he's on a date. It's a very over-the-top concept that the show never would have done 3 years earlier, but it still works because it's funny. That type of humor is what a lot of people love about the show, and it's most prominent here with episodes like the one with the dance routine or the one with Unagi. My favorite season 6 episode is the one where Ross got high, which is that season's Thanksgiving special. And I wanted to take a moment to talk about the Thanksgiving episodes in general. Usually when TV shows do holiday specials, they pick Halloween or Christmas, since those holidays inherently have a lot of tropes and character built into them, unlike Thanksgiving. But Friends as a show is all about togetherness, being there for your friends, and being appreciative of your found family. And that fits Thanksgiving perfectly. So I think Friends' tradition of having a new Thanksgiving episode each season is genius. Another thing that happens this season is Chandler and Monica moving in with each other, leading to Rachel moving in with Phoebe. It makes sense with the story and it's a natural progression for the characters, but it does also pretty much kill the friendship between Chandler and Joey, which is my favorite dynamic of the show. And this is where the chick and the duck disappearance comes in. There were constant jokes in the show that the chick and the duck were like Joey and Chandler's children, but once Chandler moved out and started having his own long-term relationship separate from Joey, appearances of the chick and the duck would have made less sense, so they were kind of phased out of the show in this era. In their final scene, Chandler apologizes to the chick and the duck because he hasn't interacted with them enough since he's moved away. He attributes this to Monica hating them, and that farewell perfectly portrays the metaphor of Chandler and Joey's friendship being no more. Shout out to the YouTuber Mac Monkey Hat. He did a whole video on the chick and the duck and I basically stole my points from him. Obviously, Chandler and Joey are still friends in the show, but their screen time together nosedives after Chandler moves out. And even when they do interact, it feels kind of off. At the beginning of the show, they felt like equals, but at this point in the show, Chandler feels significantly maturer than Joey, simply because his relationship with Monica made him a better person, while Joey's character kind of regressed into being the dumb funny guy who say dumb funny thing. I feel like I'm sounding a little too critical of season 6. It is one of my favorite seasons even though it has its flaws. I'd comfortably give it a 4 out of 5. I just sound a little meaner now because everything positive that applies to season 6 I've already said before about a previous season, and I don't want to repeat myself. It ends with Chandler proposing to Monica, which perfectly leads into season 7. Friends was originally intended to just be about the lives of single 20-somethings in New York, but as the characters and the audience and the creators got older, the storylines shifted towards themes of maturity and settling down, which was very evident in this season. Chandler and Monica get married, Rachel gets a big promotion, Joey makes strides in his acting career, and Ross has some more on-screen time with his son. These themes are most apparent in my favorite episode of season 7, the one where they all turn 30. In this episode, Rachel is having her 30th birthday, and it's intercut with flashbacks of everyone else's 30th birthday. It perfectly portrays the emotions that many people have when they turn 30, like the feeling of being behind your peers, or the fear that you might not get the chance to settle down the way you envisioned. The episode even ends with Rachel breaking up with her boyfriend for being too young and not fitting in with her life plans. This episode represents really well the shift Friends took narratively in the second half of its life, and the one where they all turn 30 also has a lot of funny moments, like Ross not being able to get out of his parking spot. This episode is kind of underrated in my opinion. Season 7 has many good episodes, but I don't think there's an undisputed classic in its roster. This one deserves a lot more love though. In this era of Friends, there's a big increase in weird storylines and weird episodes for some reason. There was a mild case of this in season 6, with Ross dating one of his students at his college. That storyline can be forgiven though because it had Bruce Willis as a guest star. However, season 7 is rife with weirdness, and not in the good way. Like when Ross tried to kiss his cousin, or when Joey had to do full frontal nudity for a movie he was in, but the director didn't like his thing, so Monica had to design a fake. You know what, I'm gonna stop there, but you get my point. Season 7 doesn't really have many notable highs or notable lows. It's just a good time, so I'd give it a 3.5. Obviously, it ends with Chandler and Monica getting married, congrats to them. Honestly, if it wasn't for Chandler and Monica getting together, the show's longevity would have been a lot worse. And I do think that if season 7 was tweaked a little bit to be more grandly climactic, Friends could have ended here as a pretty much flawless series. However, it kept going, maybe a little too long, and it resulted in 3 final seasons that were definitely off. A lot of people would consider season 8 one of their favorite seasons, but I don't really get it. Don't get me wrong, it's still decent and has a lot of great moments, like the one with the videotape, or the Brad Pitt episode, or the storyline about Joey's game show, but it just doesn't feel like Friends anymore, and I will get into more detail about that later. But let's start from the beginning. In the season 7 finale, we discover that Rachel is pregnant, and we later learn that Ross is the father. Season 8 primarily focuses on the preparation towards having this baby, as well as the conflict between Ross and Rachel during this time. You do sort of feel that the writers are starting to run out of ideas, since they felt the need to throw this baby wrench into the works so late in the show, but I actually think it's a pretty good idea, until they came up with the stupid concept of making Rachel and Joey a couple. In season 7, Rachel moved in with Joey, and to be honest, I really liked their friendship, but then in season 8, Joey caught some feelings for Rachel. Establishing a romance this major 8 years into a show always feels super out of place and forced, but it remains just a crush here, which is bearable. However, in season 9, Rachel starts having feelings towards Joey, but Joey doesn't know. Oh my god. This doesn't really work because these two characters never seem to have any real romantic tension previously, and it just feels weird. And once they do actually date, it only lasts a week because they find it awkward. So that multi-season arc that no one liked, that was super dragged out, was all for nothing. That is primarily season 9's issue though. Season 8 is just where the story was introduced, so I felt like going on that rant here. If the writers really felt that some late show relationship drama was necessary, they could have very easily paired Joey up with Phoebe, since I always thought they complemented each other well. However, I do understand that if all of the main characters go in relationships with each other by the end, it would be a little too perfect of an ending. This season ends with Rachel having her baby. Ross then plans on proposing to her, but then Joey finds the ring on the floor in Rachel's hospital room. Then he swivels around on his knee to show Rachel his discovery, and then there's a 5-second pause where Joey's like, and then there's another 5-second pause where Rachel is like, huh? And then she says,
Okay.
because she's assuming Joey's proposing to her. Are you dumb? Who did this? Friends always had an issue with its drama feeling very forced and contrived, but who let this goofy idea get past? Oh my god. Season 8 has some things in it that I don't love, as you can probably tell, but in the grand scheme of things, it's still perfectly decent. I'd say it's a 3 out of 5.
So shake it. Shake it. Shake it. Shake it.
Season 9 is probably the worst season of the entire series. That's not to say it's all bad though. I enjoyed certain episodes like the one with the lottery, but the highs of this season are nowhere near the highs of any other season. There are storylines I dislike here, for example Rachel and Joey's awkward romance, or Chandler working in Tulsa, but I feel this season's problem is more of a general issue with its writing. Friends' characters became a lot more over the top each year, and it reached a breaking point with season 9. Here everyone feels way too cheesy and one-dimensional. Each character is sort of defined by 1 or 2 traits, and every single joke is about those things. Monica likes cleaning, Ross likes dinosaurs, Joey likes sandwich. It feels very repetitive and kind of lazy. Obviously previous seasons had this to a certain extent, but their storylines actually felt novel and fun and creative, which is very hard to keep up for almost a decade of television. The character who got hurt the most here is Joey. He starts the show being an airheaded cool guy with a heart of gold, but by season 9 he just has the intelligence of a toddler, and that kind of character can be done right, but with Joey I don't think it works too well, because it kind of makes his character inconsistent, and the jokes Friends go with for Joey feel a little cheap.
Just repeat after me. Je m'appelle Claude.
Je découpe plow.
Highlights of the season for me are episodes where it's just Ross and Rachel dealing with their baby. I found those quite fun. And also I like the introduction of Phoebe's eventual husband, Mike Hannigan, played by Paul Rudd. It's hard to introduce an important character so late into a show, but I think Mike is great. Phoebe should have gone together with Joey though. I've noticed while writing the script for this video that out of all of the main characters I've talked about Phoebe the least, mainly because she probably has the fewest quantity of super major storylines out of the gang, and also the storylines with her family life never really resonated with me. I respect it being in the show though, and I do think Phoebe's twin sister Ursula is pretty funny. This section of the video was originally a lot more critical, but I rewatched some episodes and Friends' enjoyment factor remains surprisingly consistent here. If I was feeling super nice, I'd maybe give this season a 3 out of 5, but I do think it's weighed down by its flaws a lot, like that garbage shark episode, so it gets a 2.5. During season 9's production, the writers were unsure about whether it was going to be the final season or not, which sort of explains the meandering story and filler episodes, but thankfully it was picked up for a 10th and final season. season. Season 10 has a lot of the issues that season 9 has, maybe even to a larger degree. However, for whatever reason, there's more iconic episodes here that I'd rewatch, like the one where Ross is fine, or the one with Ross's tan. I think because they knew it was the final season, every episode feels like a big distinct thing, where they tie up some loose end, or they try out some interesting idea, which I respect. In the finale, Chandler and Monica adopt twins, and I actually really like the whole infertility conundrum the show had in seasons 9 and 10. It was quite common for Friends to cover serious topics that you didn't really see much on TV, like with the adoption here, or with Phoebe being a surrogate mother in season 4, and it's a thing I really liked about the show. Also in the finale, Chandler and Joey have a wholesome final storyline, where they have to destroy the iconic foosball table to save Chick Jr. and Duck Jr. who got stuck inside. This full circle moment really strengthens the chick and duck metaphor I talked about earlier, and it brings a tear to my eye. The most pivotal moment of this finale though, is Rachel giving up a huge job opportunity in Paris because she wants to stay with Ross in New York.
Oh my God, did she get off the plane? Did she get off the plane?
I got off the plane.
You could argue that this payoff was a little dragged out, and maybe Ross and Rachel were too toxic of a couple, but I really think in these later years they matured together while raising their baby, and this final moment solidifies the message of the show that the people around you who you love are the most important things in life. I really do love this finale because I think it fits the show well. Is Friends perfect? No. But it's not an accident that it's one of the biggest shows in the world. It manages to capture the fun within the simplicity and familiarity of life like no other series. It may be a little dated, and it may not be the funniest thing ever written, but I find myself enjoying it more every time I see it. It's easy to watch an out of context clip or episode of Friends and think to yourself, this sucks, the laugh track is so annoying, it's not even funny. But I think once you become familiar with the characters and dynamics of the show, Friends really becomes the perfect thing to casually watch and switch your brain off to. In conclusion, is it overrated? Probably. But is it overhated? Definitely. Anyways, season 10 gets a 3 out of 5. This is how I'd rank all the seasons from best to worst. And as of when I'm writing this script, I consider these episodes to be in my top 10 favorites. Remember to like and subscribe. Goodbye!